You didn't need it anyway, my father said, his voice casual through my phone's speaker, as if he hadn't just admitted to stealing my entire college fund. Besides, what's done is done. No point getting upset about it now. My name is Vanessa, and at 25 I was standing in my tiny apartment in London, listening to my father explain why he'd drained the account that was supposed to fund my final year of college. The fund I'd built through scholarships, part-time jobs, and careful saving since high school. How much is left? I kept my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. Left? None of it's left, honey. I had some debts to clear up, but don't worry. You're smart, you'll figure something out. Figure something out like I had a choice, like he hadn't just stolen 4 years of my hard work while I was studying abroad, unable to stop him because he'd remained a co-signer on the account I'd opened at 17. I see, I said quietly. Well, good luck with that. That's my girl, he replied, mistaking my calm for acceptance. Always practical, just like your old dad. Listen, I've got to run. Meeting some friends for drinks. We'll talk soon. Meeting friends for drinks. With my money, my future. I sat down at my small desk, overlooking the London street I'd fallen in love with during my semester abroad. 3 months left until I had to return home. 3 months to figure out how to salvage my senior year after my own father had pulled the rug out from under me. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from him. Don't mention this to your mom or grandmother. No need to worry them. Of course, he didn't want them to know, just like he hadn't wanted them to know about his gambling debts, his failed business ventures, his pattern of borrowing money he never repaid. I opened my laptop and began making a list. First, documentation. Bank statements showing the account's history, proof of my deposits, records of the scholarships I'd earned. Then, research. Legal resources, financial aid options, potential part-time jobs. My father had always underestimated me, treated me like his backup plan. Good thing you're pretty, he'd say when I brought home straight A's, as if my academic achievements were somehow less important than my appearance. You can always marry rich if college doesn't work out. But I hadn't worked this hard, come this far, to let him derail my future. He thought I was being practical when I calmly accepted his theft. He had no idea that practical was exactly what he should fear. Over the next week, I pieced together the extent of his betrayal. The account had held just over $42,000, money I'd earned through academic scholarships, summer jobs, and careful budgeting. My father had withdrawn it all in a series of transfers over the past month, each one just small enough to avoid raising immediate red flags. My roommate Emma found me surrounded by bank statements one evening. Your father did what? She exclaimed, reading over my shoulder. Can't you report him for theft? The account still had his name on it, I explained. Legally, he had every right to access it. I just never thought he'd actually do this. I should have known better. Should have remembered how he'd borrowed my birthday money throughout my childhood, always promising to pay it back but never doing so. How he'd tried to convince me to take out extra student loans in my name, claiming he'd help me repay them. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him. Don't stress about the money, you worry too much. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some guys who could get you a modeling job, better money than that degree. Each message revealed more about how little he valued my education, my independence, my future. To him, I was just another resource to exploit, another safety net for his poor choices. I started making calls to my university's financial aid office, to legal aid services, to my grandmother who'd always supported my academic dreams. I didn't tell them everything yet, just gathered information, assessed my options. My father's next call came while I was in class. Hey, princess, quick question. You wouldn't happen to have any other savings accounts, would you? Just wondering since you're always so good with money. The casual entitlement in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my tone light. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason. Just thinking about your future. You know how dads are. Thinking about my future. Like he had when he drained my college fund. Like he had when he'd tried to discourage me from studying abroad, claiming I was running away from family obligations. Sorry, Dad, in class now. Talk later. I hung up and opened my laptop, adding another item to my growing list. Close any remaining accounts he might know about. Transfer everything to new accounts at a different bank. That evening, I received an email from my grandmother. Called your father today. He seemed nervous when I asked about your college fund. Is everything okay? I smiled, imagining his discomfort. He'd always been afraid of my grandmother, the only person who'd ever successfully held him accountable. Can we talk? I wrote back. There's something you should know. My grandmother's response was immediate and fierce. After hearing the full story, she called an emergency family meeting, without my father present. That man, she fumed over our video call, my mother and aunt sitting beside her, has gone too far this time. Stealing from his own daughter? I watched their faces as I shared the bank statements, the text messages, the casual way he'd dismissed my future. My mother's hands trembled as she read his messages. I had no idea, she whispered. He told me you decided to take a break from school, that you were thinking about moving back home. Of course he had. My father had always been skilled at spinning narratives that suited his needs. How many times had he reinterpreted my achievements to make them about him? How often had he taken credit for my success while secretly undermining it? I've been documenting everything, I told them. Every withdrawal, every message, every call. I'm not letting him get away with this. My aunt, a lawyer, leaned forward. The account issue is tricky since he was a co-signer, but there might be other angles we can pursue. Has he made any promises in writing about repaying the money? I pulled up more screenshots. Emails where he'd acknowledged the money was for my education. Texts where he'd casually mentioned paying me back someday. Perfect, my aunt said. Not legally binding, but excellent leverage for what comes next. What comes next? My mother asked. Next, my grandmother declared, we make Gregory realize exactly what he's done, and whom he's done it to. The plan came together quickly. My grandmother would confront him first, letting him know the family was aware of his actions. My aunt would draft a formal demand letter, laying out his options for making restitution. And my mother would finally file for the divorce she'd been hesitating over for years. He's always underestimated you, my grandmother said. Treated you like an extension of himself instead of your own person. Time to show him who you really are. That night, my father called again. Your grandmother seemed upset today, he said carefully. You didn't tell her anything, did you? About what, Dad? The college fund you stole? The future you tried to derail? Or just your general belief that your daughter's education means nothing compared to your bar tab? Silence on his end. Then, now, Princess. Don't call me Princess. Don't call me at all. Everything goes through Aunt Sarah from now on. Sarah? Why would your aunt need to be involved? Because she's a lawyer, Dad, and you're about to need one too. My father's reaction was predictable. First denial, then anger, finally desperate attempts at manipulation. You're blowing this out of proportion, he texted. It was just money. Family is more important than money. I forwarded each message to my aunt without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. His next move was to show up at my grandmother's house, where I was staying until my return flight to London. She didn't let him pass the front porch. How dare you? She demanded, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Stealing your daughter's college fund? Have you no shame? Mother, please. He tried to lower his voice. This is a family matter. Exactly. And you've betrayed your family. Now leave before I call the police. He left, but the text continued. Your grandmother's turned you against me. I'm your father. You owe me respect. After everything I've done for you? I thought about everything he'd actually done for me. How he'd tried to discourage my academic achievements. How he'd borrowed my childhood savings. How he'd treated my success as something he could cash in on whenever he needed. My aunt's demand letter arrived at his house via certified mail. Inside was a detailed accounting of every penny he'd taken, along with options for repayment. You can't sue your own father, he called, outraged. Watch me, I replied, then hung up. The family fallout was spectacular. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years called to express their disgust. His sister, my Aunt Patricia, shared stories of how he'd borrowed money from her children's birthday cards, too. He's always been like this, she said, taking what isn't his, expecting everyone to forgive him because he's family. My mother finally filed for divorce, citing financial infidelity, among other reasons. During their first hearing, his pattern of stealing from me came to light. You emptied your daughter's college fund to pay gambling debts? The judge asked incredulously. I was going to pay it back, he protested weakly. With what money? According to these statements, you haven't held a steady job in 3 years. His carefully constructed image of the fun-loving, generous father was crumbling. Every attempt to defend himself just revealed more of his true nature. The university's financial aid office proved surprisingly helpful once they understood the situation. They helped me secure emergency funding and worked out a payment plan for my final year. My grandmother insisted on covering what she could, though I was hesitant to accept. Unlike your father, she said firmly, I understand the value of education and of keeping promises. My father's response to the demand letter was to claim poverty, insisting he had no way to repay what he'd stolen. Then my aunt discovered his new car purchase, the vacation photos he'd posted on social media, the country club membership he somehow still maintained. He's not broke, she explained. He's just good at hiding assets, but not good enough. His text messages grew increasingly desperate. You're ruining my life. My own daughter turning against me like this. I raised you better than this. Each message showed more of his true colors. The loving father act dropped away, revealing the manipulator beneath. The final straw came when he tried to turn my younger cousins against me, telling them I was trying to bankrupt him out of spite. Instead, they shared screenshots of his messages, adding to my growing file of evidence. Remember when Uncle Greg told us our college funds were safe with him? My cousin Jake wrote. Guess we know what that meant. My aunt helped them secure their own accounts before he could strike again. His pattern of financial abuse was finally being exposed, one family member at a time. During my mother's divorce proceedings, more revelations surfaced. He'd been hiding money for years, taking out loans in her name, even trying to remortgage their house without her knowledge. He's been treating the whole family like his personal ATM, my mother realized, and we all just kept making excuses for him. My grandmother arranged a family meeting, again without him present. Relatives shared stories of loans never repaid, promises broken, trust betrayed. Each story strengthened our resolve to hold him accountable. He's always counted on family loyalty to shield him from consequences, my aunt observed. Time to show him that loyalty goes both ways. The consequences hit my father like dominoes falling. First, my mother's divorce attorney uncovered his hidden accounts, leading to a much larger settlement than he'd anticipated. Then my aunt's legal pressure forced him to agree to a repayment plan for my stolen funds, with interest. His careful facade of the generous, fun-loving dad crumbled completely when the family learned he'd been borrowing money from elderly relatives, promising returns on investments that never materialized. A regular Ponzi scheme, my aunt muttered, adding these discoveries to her growing file. His text messages shifted from angry to pleading. I'm still your father. We can work this out. Everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you forgive me? What will people think of you, treating your dad this way? I thought about all the times he'd used guilt to control me, how he'd twisted every situation to make himself the victim. Not anymore. Through my grandmother's connections, I secured a part-time job that allowed me to complete my degree while working. My professors, understanding my situation, helped me arrange a flexible schedule. Every small victory felt like a step further from his influence. The family's support surprised me. Cousins shared their own stories of his financial manipulation. Aunts and uncles who'd once enabled his behavior now stood firmly against him. Even distant relatives reached out to offer encouragement. Your father called, my grandmother told me one evening, trying to convince me to talk you out of the repayment plan. Said it was destroying the family. What did you tell him? That he destroyed it himself when he stole from his own daughter. His last attempt at manipulation was to show up at my graduation, uninvited, unwelcome, but determined to play the role of proud father. That's my girl, he announced loudly to anyone who would listen. Gets her business sense from me. My Aunt Sarah had him escorted out before the ceremony began. Your success belongs to you, she told me afterward. He doesn't get to claim credit for what he tried to prevent. A year after the confrontation over my stolen college fund, my father's carefully constructed world had completely unraveled. The divorce had exposed his financial schemes to everyone. Former friends who'd invested in his business ventures were demanding answers. Relatives he'd borrowed from were taking legal action. My graduation party, hosted by my grandmother, became a celebration not just of my academic achievement, but of my independence. Friends and family gathered to support me, many of them sharing their own stories of standing up to manipulative parents. Your father called me yesterday, my mother said during the party. Wanted to know if I'd talk to you about dropping the repayment plan. Said he's learned his lesson. Has he? I asked, thinking of his latest social media posts, still showing him living beyond his means, still pretending everything was fine. No, she sighed. He's learned he can't manipulate you anymore. That's not the same thing. The repayment plan my aunt had arranged was strict. Monthly payments directly from his paycheck, no excuses accepted. He'd finally had to get a real job when his schemes dried up. His previous lifestyle impossible to maintain now that no one would lend him money. It's not fair, he'd complained in his last email. I'm your father. You're supposed to love me unconditionally. Love isn't a blank check, I'd replied, my last direct communication with him. And conditions are what happen when you break trust. My career was taking off. I'd secured a position with a top firm in London, my degree and determination opening doors I'd once thought closed. Each success felt sweeter for having been earned entirely on my own terms. My grandmother had become my strongest ally, her fierce protection a stark contrast to my father's self-serving love. He called again, she told me over Sunday dinner. Wanted to know if you'd gotten that job in London. Said he'd love to visit once you're settled. To visit or to ask for money? I asked, already knowing the answer. Both, probably. I told him you're done funding his lifestyle. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Relatives who'd once enabled his behavior now shared warnings about his latest schemes. His sister, my Aunt Patricia, had started a family group chat specifically to track his attempts at manipulation. He tried to convince my son to co-sign a car loan, she reported one day. Told him it would help build his credit. Sound familiar? It did. He'd tried the same tactic with me at 18, attempting to saddle me with debt before I'd even started college. Back then, my grandmother had intercepted the paperwork and warned me about predatory practices, including those from family members. Now, watching his world shrink as mine expanded, I felt not victory, but validation. Every payment he made, forced by legal pressure rather than paternal responsibility, proved what I'd always known. He was capable of doing the right thing. He just never thought he had to. My success had become a form of protection. The more I achieved, the less power he had to affect my future. The degree he'd tried to derail now hung on my wall, each accomplishment a reminder that his greatest mistake wasn't stealing my money. It was underestimating my resolve. My return to London marked a new chapter. The firm had offered me not just a job but a future I'd built despite my father's attempts to derail it. My small flat in the city became a symbol of independence, paid for with my own money, decorated with my own taste, free from any influence he might try to claim. His attempts to maintain contact became increasingly transparent. First came the birthday card, the first he'd sent in years, with a carefully crafted message about how proud he was of our achievements. Did you see how he signed it? My mother asked over the phone. Love, Dad, your biggest supporter. The audacity of that man. Then came the social media posts. tagging me in old family photos with captions about how he'd always encouraged my dreams. Each post carefully curated to paint himself as the devoted father who'd sacrificed everything for his daughter's success. My Aunt Sarah helped me draft a cease and desist letter when the posts escalated to claims about his investment in my education. "He's trying to rewrite history," she explained. "Make sure there's a paper trail proving otherwise." His response was predictable. More attempts at manipulation, more claims of family loyalty, more hints about his financial struggles. But his words had lost their power to hurt me. Through family gossip, I heard about his latest schemes. He'd started telling people he had connections in London, suggesting he could help their children find opportunities abroad. Each attempt to profit from my success backfired when they contacted me to verify his claims. "Your father says you're hiring at your firm," one family friend wrote. "He offered to put in a good word for my daughter, for a small consulting fee, of course." I wrote back explaining that my father had no connection to my firm, no influence over hiring, and no right to charge fees for false promises. Each response felt like another brick in the wall between his lies and my truth. My grandmother visited me in London, her first trip abroad at 70. Seeing my life through her eyes, the career I'd built, the home I'd made, the future I'd secured, brought everything full circle. "You know what makes me proudest?" she said over dinner at my favorite local pub. "Not just what you've achieved, but how you achieved it. You didn't let him turn you bitter. You just got stronger." That evening, I received another text from him. "Heard Mom's visiting. The flat must be cramped. I know some great hotels, if you need help with the expense." I showed my grandmother the message, and we both laughed. The same old tactics, transparent as glass now that I saw them clearly. "Should I respond?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Darling," she said, raising her glass, "your success is all the response he needs." 2 years after the confrontation over my stolen college fund, my father's repayment plan was still in force, each monthly payment a reminder of his accountability. He'd tried various schemes to reduce or delay the payments, but my aunt's legal oversight remained firm. During a family gathering back home, my cousin Jake shared his own victory. He'd graduated debt-free, his college fund secured in an account my father couldn't access. "You know what Uncle Greg said when I told him?" Jake laughed. "That I should thank you for overreacting about your fund. Said your dramatic response helped him learn an important lesson." "Did he learn, though?" I asked, thinking of his latest attempts to convince relatives to invest in his new business venture. "He learned not to target family members who have good lawyers," my Aunt Sarah interjected. "That's about it." My career continued to flourish. The firm had promoted me to senior position, my reputation built on the same attention to detail and determination that had helped me overcome my father's betrayal. His Christmas card arrived at my London flat, thick with forced cheerfulness and hints about his financial struggles. Inside, he'd written, "Still paying for one mistake. When will you let it go?" I pinned it to my bulletin board next to my degree and latest promotion letter, reminders that his one mistake had failed to define my future. His signature at the bottom, once a symbol of paternal authority, now looked exactly like what it was, the mark of a man who'd bet against his daughter's strength and lost. At my firm's annual charity gala, I was asked to speak about persistence and overcoming obstacles. I didn't mention my father directly, but I talked about the moment I'd learned my college fund was gone, not as a story of betrayal, but as a lesson in self-reliance. "Sometimes," I told the audience, "the people who should support you the most become the obstacles you need to overcome. Their underestimation becomes your motivation." My father saw the speech online. Someone had shared it in the family group chat he'd been excluded from. His response came through my grandmother. "She's still angry, using my mistake to get attention." "No," my grandmother had replied. "She's successful, using her strength to help others. There's a difference." The last payment from my father arrived on a Tuesday, the final installment of the money he'd stolen. He'd attached a note. "Now can we be family again?" I filed the receipt with all my other documentation, the bank statements, the demanding texts, the social media posts where he'd tried to rewrite history. Not because I needed them anymore, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. My mother, now happily remarried, put it best. He thought taking your money would keep you dependent on him. Instead, it set you free. She was right. Every attempt he'd made to hold me back had pushed me forward instead. His greatest punishment wasn't the repayment plan or the family's disapproval. It was watching me succeed without him, beyond him, despite him.